around and accuse you of attacking them. Every case of police brutality against a Negro follows the same pattern. They attack you, bust you all upside your mouth, and then take you to court and charge you with assault. What kind of democracy is that? What kind of freedom is that? What kind of social or political system is it when a black man has no voice in court, has nothing on his side other than what the white man chooses to give him? My brothers and sisters, we have to put a stop to this. And it will never be stopped until we stop it ourselves. They attack the victim. And then the criminal who attacked the victim accuses the victim of attacking him. Yes, this is American justice. Yes, this is American democracy. Yes, and those of you who are familiar with it know that in America, democracy is hypocrisy. Now, if I'm wrong, put me in jail. But if you can't prove that a democracy is not hypocrisy, then don't put your hands on me.
If you've written a book and you're dreaming of publishing it and sharing your story with the world, but you're not quite sure.
Like, but we're also taught that at any time, anyone in any way inflicts or seeks to inflict violence upon us, we are within our religious rights to retaliate in self-defense to the maximum degree of our ability. We never initiate any violence upon anyone. But if anyone attacks us, we reserve the right to defend ourselves. So to accuse us of being violent is like accusing a man who is being lynched, who is being hung on a tree, simply because he struggles vigorously against his lyncher. The victim is accused of violence, but the lyncher is never accused of violence. And I only point this out because the various racist groups that are set up in this country by whites and who have actually practiced violence against blacks for 400 years are never associated or identified or made synonymous with the term violence. But whites speak of Muslims almost synonymously with violence. Whenever Muslims are mentioned by them, violence is brought up, but it's not connected with any other group. This is a sort of a propaganda tactic, or what I would call psychological warfare, to in some way make the image of the Muslims in this country be a violent image rather than a religious image.
I'd like to ask a question in that regard. What's interesting is that members of the Nation of Islam have not used violence even when black Americans were attacked. How do you account for this? Does this in any way contradict some of the basic premises of your movement?
I don't know how you mean.
Well, you maintain, for example, that you will not, or that you should not use violence unless you are attacked by the white man. And I think we can note in the last several years, certainly, dozens and dozens and dozens of instances in which Negroes have been attacked, killed in some instances.
You mean in these demonstrations?
These demonstrations and the bombings, for example, recently in Birmingham, where they killed 4 little Negro girls. And what interests me is the fact is that the Nation of Islam has not done anything to retaliate.
I think you should be happy.
The important thing is, does your lack of action contradict any of your basic principles?
I'll explain it. You should be happy that Muslims who follow the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, number one, don't believe in any form of integration, and who believe that every mention of the word integration by whites, whether it be from the mouth of Kennedy on down to the mouth of the lowest, raggediest white liberal in the street who is beatnik-like involving himself in these integration efforts, if we believed in it, we would integrate, and we would fight anybody who got in our way or made any effort whatsoever to stop us from integrating. If we really believe that the law of the land, the Supreme Court, and other so-called judicial bodies were for real when they talked about integration, we would integrate. And knowing that the law was on our side, in any effort we made to demonstrate toward integration, why, we would know the law should be on our side, if it's the law of the land. If it is the law of the land, then the demonstrators are within the law, and the discriminators are against the law. But to show you the hypocrisy of the law, when Negroes demonstrate for integration, instead of arresting the discriminators, the law arrests the demonstrators. So this is a foolish move on the part of Negroes. And when you foolishly get yourself involved with an enemy, then whatever comes upon you, that's your business. As Muslims, we believe that separation is the best way and the only sensible way, not integration. And but on the other hand, when we see our people being brutalized by white bigots, white racists, we think that they are foolish to allow themselves to be beaten and brutalized and do nothing whatsoever to protect themselves. They are foolish. They should have the right to defend themselves against any attack made against them by anyone. If a dog is biting a black man, the black man should kill the dog. Whether the dog is a police dog, a hound dog, or any kind of dog. If a dog is sick on a black man, when that black man is doing nothing but trying to take advantage of what the government says is supposed to be his, then that black man should kill that dog or any two-legged dog.
Greetings. Hello. We hope that you are well today. Hope that you are hanging on to your sanity and that you are still in high spirits to approach this day and all the coming days in a way that would enable you to be the best mechanism, reach your highest potential to represent justice and forward human progress. We are thankful that you have decided to join us today for this episode of Our Ancestors' Voices. Today, we're going to be talking about the continued attacks against the people of Haiti. Our thoughts are always with them in Haiti. Of course, today we're also thinking of the people of Venezuela. And we will be doing a program on Venezuela next week. And so we will obviously talk about that much more then. But we want you to know that all of these situations are related. What's happening to the people in Haiti, what's happening to the people in Cuba, which was the program we did last week, what's happening to the people right now in Venezuela, what's happening to all peace and justice loving people all over the planet Earth is all related. And if you know that, then you understand that these latest tricks that they're pulling against the people of Venezuela will not succeed. You will know that the tricks that they continue to pull against the people of Haiti will not succeed. They will not succeed against the people of Cuba. They will not succeed against any of humanity. I just got off the phone with Shakura. And of course, she is down in the Caribbean. She's in Havana, Cuba. And I was asking her about how the people in Cuba have reacted to the attacks against Venezuela. Obviously, those are the two socialist countries in the Western Hemisphere, right? So, they have a common bond, they have a really strong relationship. And she talked about all of the rallies and demonstrations that they have gone to over the last day or so. And they had an audience yesterday with the prime minister of Cuba, the first woman prime minister, by the way, Sister Maria del Carmen Arellano, came and met with the delegation that Shakura is a part of. And in her words, she said it would be the equivalent of Kamala Harris coming to talk to your group. And when I heard that, I thought of, because these are really examples in democracy, because the capitalist system will tell you that Venezuela is not a democratic society. They've been saying that 24/7 over the last 24 hours, that Nicolas Maduro is a dictator, that Hugo Chavez before him was a dictator, blah, 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 a bunch of defecation coming out of people's mouths. But yet, in Cuba, another country they've accused for 6 decades of being a dictatorship, the prime minister of the country comes and meets with a delegation of people from the US. And you are here in the US with Kamala Harris, who would be the equivalent of that in this country. And she would never have a meeting with you unless she was running for office and trying to get your votes. That's the only way that would ever happen. Her and what's that other clown cracker, JD Vance, whatever, they wouldn't meet with you unless you had something that they wanted. And even if you had a occurrence where you were in the same room with these people, you would not be able to approach them unless it was scripted. And if you tried to approach them, somebody would grab you and put you in a headlock and would probably choke you out. But yet they will tell you that this is the democratic country. I mean, see the nonsense there. That's a clear example of the contradictions there with that, right? And then, she talked about the other thing that really inspired me is she talked about, I asked her, how are the people doing on the streets in Cuba? And she said that the people on the delegation, like me and you, if you're a peace and justice loving person and you're not in Venezuela, I'm not talking about the police agents and the neo Nazis that are on here, because they're on here all the time. They send hate mail, they dox, they do whatever the hell they do, and I keep doing that. Keep it coming. I mean, you don't. They don't understand. You're not dealing with that kind of African that you think you're dealing with. You're not dealing with those kind of people. Those people don't exist in these circles. We are not afraid of you. And we know that you can bleed just like we can bleed. So we don't give a damn what you do. Keep doing whatever the hell you're doing. You're not making me lose 1 ounce of sleep. I do lose sleep over what's happening to people in places like Venezuela. So I asked her this question, like, how are the people in Cuba taking that? And her response was that they are, the people in the delegation are worried, like I'm worried for the people in Venezuela. You, if you're a genuine person, you're worried. But she said the people in Cuba are like, this is what we live with. They're not going to break us, and we're going to be here for our, family in Venezuela. And that, to me, encapsulates everything about the Cuban Revolution. We tried to portray it as best we could in last week's program, but that really says it all. And the same spirit exists with the people in Haiti. And that's why we want to talk about that. And there's so many parallels with the oppressed people on the planet, with the marginalized people. So we're glad that you're here to join us. You're in the right place. Don't give up. Don't be discouraged. That's just what they want you to do, is give up and be discouraged. And if you're just by yourself and you're not engaged in any collective action, it's a lot easier to get discouraged. But I'm not discouraged. I just got off the phone with someone in my organization who's down there with other like-minded radical activists, others from our organization, others from many other organizations, And this is how you keep your sanity. This is how you keep your spirit high, because what this does for you is help you understand that you're not alone. I know I'm not alone. And I also know that even if those fascists get to me, it doesn't mean a damn thing. I'm just one person. My work is out here so that people can utilize it and benefit from it even after I'm not here. That's the whole point. Because I know that this is not going to all uh, come to fruition just in the few short years I have left on the planet Earth. I'm trying to put things in place that people can use after I'm physically gone. And so this is the type of thing that enhances my spirit. And I know that we can't be defeated. And if you don't know that, it's because you just ain't living right. We can help you. I can help you learn how to live right so that you have a much more positive perspective, but you just ain't living right. I'm not discouraged in the least today. I'm not demoralized. I don't even know what the hell that means. I'm ready to fight, goddammit. I'm ready to fight these people. And I don't understand why so many people aren't. And I know that it's my responsibility to make the contribution to help them understand that they can win. And so I'm encouraged by the opportunity to do that. And you should be too. And on that spirit, we acknowledge and give praise to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, many of them in Venezuela. That's their land, their oil, their land, their base. Uh, Ugly cracker get on TV talking about, we're going to take the oil. All you're going to do is pass gas. That's the only thing you can do by yourself, you ugly ass clown. That's the only thing you can do without assistance. You ain't going to take nothing. And if you think that they're going to take something, then you just got a lot of information to seek. They ain't going to take nothing. Just why you think this is over? You think that's it and it's over? You just haven't studied the people of Venezuela. You don't know much about the Bolivarian Revolution. You don't know much about revolution, period. Because like they're showing these videos of people celebrating, and a lot of these videos have been identified as fake. There are other celebrations that happened years ago, right? But even if all of them were real, that's not even the point. It doesn't even matter, because I get all the hate mail. So I've made posts. I made a video yesterday about what they did to President Maduro, and this little European girl, bless her heart, she reached out and she said, you if you haven't talked to the people in Venezuela, you have no right to comment. And I wrote back, you could turn your head left right now, you could turn your head right, and you will find plenty of people who don't know a goddamn thing about what's happening in whatever little broke ass town you're writing this from, whatever little broke ass state you're writing from, this broke ass country. They don't know anything about that. So clearly, physical geometry, where you're located, is not the criteria of scientific qualification. Clearly, that's true. Just some random ass person that's born in Cuba, that's born in Venezuela, that doesn't mean a damn thing. That just means they're just like some random ass. You could go right now and find people in your family will tell you that the U.S. is the most free and democratic country on the planet Earth. And we all know that's a goddamn lie. So clearly, that's not the criteria. Just where someone's from, that automatically instilled. And I said to her, I thought you people were against affirmative action, because that's affirmative action. You giving somebody the credit of knowing what the hell they're talking about just because they're from somewhere. It has nothing to do with any work they've done. They just popped out of somebody somewhere, so they're an expert on that place. That's how insane people think and talk. So we're going to talk about the people of Haiti, who should give you strong inspiration. So we acknowledge the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. We acknowledge the African masses. Revolutions are fought for the people on the bottom of the society. Whether you knew it or not, a lot of the people in Venezuela are African people. African people. That's who the revolution was fought for. It's not fought for that bourgeoisie, elite ass woman, Machado, who's an Ivy League school graduate, and all those white Venezuelans, because that's who you see celebrating, just like in Cuba. That's who's celebrating. Hell no, the revolution wasn't for them. It wasn't supposed to be for them. They're a bunch of criminals, thugs, crooks. that stole all the resources from the people. Revolutions are fought for the people on the bottom of society. But none of these capitalist news outlets are going to let you hear from them. They're always going to go to the bourgeoisie. So we know that. We know that even within our African people, there are plenty of people who've sold out. That's why we say there's crackers and then there's graham crackers. We know a lot of our people are graham crackers. So you got to understand class struggle. That's why, in the APRP, we have nation, gender, class struggle. We don't just analyze the world through race. We don't just analyze the world through class. We don't just analyze the world through gender. We make a serious attempt to analyze it through all three. All right. So thank you for being here, and I'll get us started. Just for some people, especially the police and the racists. So at least y'all know who we are, because like the last couple of doxes that were done on me, I'm really disappointed. Like they didn't even get the organization right. They didn't even get the work right. Like, at least don't be so lazy ass, you all, that you can't even get the information correct. At least write down correct information, right? Like, don't be so you guys so damn lazy, and you that's why you're upset, because you're lazy. You don't have initiative or skill to do anything to improve your life, and so it's just easier for you to blame us for your mediocrity. That's what that is. You'll never convince me that it's anything else beyond that, because I was telling my wife and I were talking the other day, and I told her, like, we're for all of humanity. I don't care who they are, if they're for justice. I said, but the honest to God truth of my life is I can't really name one European my entire life who has inspired me to be a better person. I can name a million of them who have attacked my dignity, who have racially profiled me, who have engaged in discrimination against me, who have talked a lot and not done a goddamn thing. I can name a million like that, but I can't name one who has been a strong inspiration in my life. I can name a lot of indigenous people who have been inspirations in my life. I can name a number of Asians who have been inspirations in my life. I can name a number of trans people who have been inspirations in my life. And of course, I can name all of the African people, whatever gender they are, who have been the prominent inspiration in my life. But I'm just being honest, I can't name a single one. And she said, yeah, come to think of it, I can't either. And I think that that's the point, is that a lot of white folks are just mediocre. And that's really the issue. That's why they're so mad at all of us. As the African said, you've had a 500-year head start and you're still sitting right here with us. If I were you, I'd be mad too, goddamn it. Shit. But look in the mirror. That's who you need to be mad at. And look at the system. That's what you need to be mad at. Our Ancestors' Voices is sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, AAPRP. We are here. We ain't going nowhere. The APRP is a revolutionary, independent, and when I say that, I don't mean we're not physically going anywhere. Like, we're going home to Africa, but we aren't leaving this fight. That's what that means. Because some people, are just really so confused about everything. You got to clarify. The APRP is a revolutionary, independent, mass Pan-African political party with its base in Africa. And our objective is Pan-Africanism, one unified socialist Africa. We are working to achieve Pan-Africanism based on Kwame Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, the strategy displayed in that book. And this program is sponsored each week by myself, Ajamu, and my daughter, Shakura, or Dr. Shakura. Umi is both of our last names. She's out of the country right now, as I just mentioned. She will actually be back next week. And next week, I'll be out of the country. So, we're taking turns doing this, but we make sure we come with it every week. I'll be here. I'll be on the program next Sunday. I will just be at home in Africa, if all goes well. So thank you for joining us, and we'll just get started with a quick history of Haiti. Very important. When Cristobal Colon, who you know as Christopher Columbus, invaded the Western Hemisphere in 1492, and if you look on the map on the screen, it's circled with the arrow where he stumbled and landed, because, he was a drunken bum, so, just happened to stumble into that area. The people working the ship were the ones who did the work. He didn't do a goddamn thing but get drunk every day. But he and his pirates stumbled into the area in the Caribbean that they named Hispaniola. That area there. It's a region that has Dominican Republic, Haiti's there, Jamaica's not too far away. And that region was inhabited at that time by indigenous people, of course. That's the people who were there. And the Taínos and the Arawaks were the people who were there. And they didn't call that region Hispaniola. They called it Ayiti. So that's what you should call it. Don't use the term Hispanola. Don't use the term Hispanic. It's like, who are you? Who are you? Who is getting in your head with all this nonsense? Ayiti. That was what the region was called by the Taínos and the Arawaks. As the Europeans continued to invade and wage war against indigenous people, during that entire period, the transatlantic slave trade brought large numbers of African people to that region of Ayiti, while the indigenous people were being annihilated, right? So by 1791, an estimated third of the entire millions of Africans who were brought to the Western Hemisphere were in that region right there. We're in that region. And this explains to you why the populations of Barbados and the Virgin Islands, Bahamas, Jamaica, Haiti, Cuba, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, all those countries have large African populations. That is the reason why, because of the transatlantic slave trade. It's the only reason. I was talking to an African. He's like, well, I don't know if we were in slavery. My parents were from Jamaica. And I'm like, well, how the hell do you think they got to Jamaica? Do you have receipts where they chartered a boat from Europe? I guess you think that's where you were from. So, I mean, this is what it is. This is the history. That's irrefutable history. Okay. So we were a third of the Africans were in that region in the Western Hemisphere at that time. All right. And then what emerged from there, and on the screen, there's a recreated picture image of Jean-Jacques Dessalines, and we'll talk about him in a second. But of course, the European countries consolidated their colonization of the entire world. They did it in Asia, they did it in Africa, and they did it in the Americas after the invasion of Cristobal Colon or Christopher Columbus. And so as France consolidated its control over the region, if you think about it, in the Caribbean, there are countries that were controlled by Britain. This is what they did, right? Jamaica, Barbados, Virgin Islands, those countries, English. That's because the British colonized them. And then the Spanish colonized the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico, right? That's why they speak in Cuba. That's why they speak Spanish in those countries. And then the French colonized Haiti. That's why they speak French. And this is what they've done to us. And by doing that, their objective was to take us away from our real identity, right? That's what they were able to do. And I'll make an important point about that in just a second. But as France consolidated its control over that region, that large number of Africans that I talked about who now existed in that region were enslaved. But that resulted in multiple slave revolts. And you should read C.L.R. James' book. He's an African from the Caribbean. He's from Trinidad. The same country that George Patton was from, the same country that Kwame Ture is from. And in James's book, Pan-African Slave Revolts, he talks about the 300 some odd slave revolts that existed in the Western Hemisphere. And of course, he talks about the ones you're familiar with, Nat Turner, Gabriel Prosser, Denmark Vesey and those, but he also talks about the ones in the Caribbean and South America and Central America that you're not so much familiar with. And he talks about, in large part, the Haitian Revolution and how that came to be. But before we talk about that, it's important to note that the slave revolts that happened in that region, in areas in Ayiti, or what now is known as Haiti, our people were very successful with those slave revolts. And it's important, especially for Africans in the U.S., to understand that because of this large number of Africans who were taken to the Caribbean, Africans outnumbered Europeans in the Caribbean. And this is the reason why today in Haiti, a lot of what happens in Haiti today resembles African society. A lot of people, like, they practice Santeria, which comes from Africa as a spiritual worship. You know, a lot of people, they practice Ife, you know, which is you know, it's related to Santeria. They do that. A lot of the people, like in places like Bahia in Brazil, you still have pockets of people who speak Yoruba in Igbo from Nigeria because they had the numbers. They're still aware of their culture. They weren't able to take everything from them because they didn't have the numbers to do that, the Europeans. Whereas here in the US, Europeans outnumbered Africans. So they were able to systematically assault our understanding of our African personality. And that's why today we're so deaf and dumb about Africa. That's the reason why. Because that's what happened. We don't even know. Like I was at a New Year's celebration with friends a couple of days ago, and somebody came out with the Black Eyed Peas. And a lot of you Africans, you already know what I'm going to say. Every New Year's Day, you get Black Eyed Peas and you're supposed to keep them in your wallet and your purse for good luck throughout the year. And so, you know, it was exciting. Everybody's excited about it. And I told them, you know, you should know that that's really a West African Akan custom that came over on the slave ships with us, like the Black Eyed Peas came over on the slave ship with us. So that's why, you know, it's important for us to know that just from our history. But these slave revolts in Ayiti or Haiti were largely successful, as I said. And in 1802, the Africans in Haiti were able to evict the French from Haiti under the leadership of Toussaint Overture. They were able to do that. And this, at that time in 1802, Overture declared Haiti independent, right? But Napoleon, the French dictator, that's a real dictator. Napoleon was a real dictator, right? In France. You know, you talking about people talk about Nicolas Maduro was a dictator. Like, shut the hell up, please. You know, I get the hate mail. I told another man, name one book on Venezuela that you've read. He said, well, you name books. I named 5 or 6 that I can remember that I've read, right? About the Bolivarian Revolution, Hugo Chavez, about how since the revolution, 26 years, they've eradicated literacy. Like, I don't want to give it away because we're going to talk about it next week. But my point is that I said, so I'm waiting for you. Never heard back from them. Bunch of cowards. And y'all, if you arm yourself with the correct education, then you could stand up to cowards instead of being more afraid than the cowards are. I ain't afraid. Bring it on. Bring all of it on. So what we're saying is that Overture, Toussaint declared Haiti independent in 1802, but Napoleon wasn't going for that. They weren't trying to, you know, these capitalist countries are dependent upon these colonies and these exploited territories to amass their wealth. You know, we've talked about a million times how the wealth in this backward ass country is the result of the transatlantic slave trade. The slave trade drove industrialization. The industrialization increased technology. The banking system, the insurance system, all of the things that made this country so financially wealthy came from exploitation. So they weren't going to want to give up their colonies so easily. So Napoleon sent another invading force, and they were able to gain some control again over Haiti. They were able to capture Toussaint Overture and to execute him. But Jean-Jacques Dessalines, who is the recreated picture on the screen again, assumed military command of Haitian forces, and they were able to force the French to leave Haiti on January 1st, 1804. And that created the Haitian Revolution, January 1st, 1804. And 2 important points of this is that Haiti, at that time, 1804, became the first country in the Western Hemisphere to eradicate the transatlantic slave trade. This country didn't do that until 60 years later, right? Brazil didn't do it until 80 years after that. All right. The ability of the Africans in Haiti to be so victorious, like I said, was they were able to maintain a lot of their cultural identity. One of the things, if you read revolutionary African psychiatrists and psychologists like Frantz Fanon, who was born in Martinique and helped in the Algerian Revolution, Pan-Africanist. Or if you read Steve Biko from Azania, South Africa, Steve Biko wrote I Write What I Like. You should read that book. And Frantz Fanon wrote White Skin, uh, uh, I can't, White Skin, Black Mask. I can't think of the name right now. I read the book so many times, so many years ago. But look up Frantz Fanon if you don't know what it is, and read those books, because they both talk about the psychology of oppression and how in subjugating people, you have to get them to think they don't really have a culture. And so this was the attack that's been waged against African people in the Western Hemisphere, against indigenous people in the Western Hemisphere. And this is why we struggle so much. You know, we're trying to identify with America. Like people say things like African American, um, African with no knowledge of Africa, American with no acceptance in the society. And there's some truth to that statement, because we're kind of in a limbo, and it keeps us from being able to uh, understand the things that bind us so that we can unify and come together. So these are important things to understand, you know, about our experience. But examples of African cultural practices in Haiti to further illustrate the point of the strength of the culture. No people liberate themselves without an understanding of culture. No people. And Africans here in the US are the only people here who think we can do that. Not all of us, but some of us believe we can make strides being disconnected from our culture and our history. And how has that worked out for us? It has not. The best that we get from that is being caricatures of the capitalist system. We certainly have not made any strides with that approach to liberate the masses of our people. Nothing has happened in that area to accomplish that. But if you look at Haiti, for example, the uninterrupted influence of Africa in Haiti, despite the slave trade, it's undeniable. Verdun, or what you probably know by voodoo, there's no such thing as voodoo, that's Hollywood. Verdun is an age-old historical African faith that was in Africa before Christianity came, before Islam came, before Judaism came. Not saying one is better than the other. They all serve a positive purpose as long as they're used to guide the people to stand up for justice. If they're just used to buy the minister a Tesla, then burn that goddamn church down. But if it's used to engage in inspiration for the masses of people, then it's a positive force. It's a positive force. And those of you that go to those institutions, you should demand that they do that. Otherwise, you know, you're part of the problem. But Verdun is practiced in Haiti today. Verdun is it's the same as Santeria or Ife. You know, these types of African forms of spiritual worship, still widely practiced. Santeria is practiced in the Dominican Republic as well, in Cuba as well. You know, Shakur has been to ceremonies for it, she mentioned, you know, and I went to ceremonies like that when I was in those countries. So as well. And Haitian music forms like Rara and Kumpa have serious African roots, just like other forms of music in the Caribbean, like salsa and merengue, reggae, have those same African roots. Rhythm and blues and gospel have those same African roots. It's all African music. All of it is. Even country music is African music because it derives from the blues. And the blues derive from the Negro spirituals of us talking about our existence under slavery. When they say, and they had to use code wording, right? When they sing Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, that's a song calling for us to be free. Y'all don't know that because you went to church under Pastor Chickenfoot, Pastor Pig's Feet, and he wasn't going to tell you that because all he's concerned about is you putting money in the collection plate. I saw a video of a graham cracker coon pastor, and he had driven, he had a Rolls Royce, and he drove it on the stage at the church and was telling people that this is what would happen to them if they supported his church. You know, goddamn well, that's not going to happen to those people if they give you all their money. They ain't going to be able to buy a Volkswagen. They're not going to be able to buy a Pinto with that. Like you only can buy. It's like the the pyramid schemes. It's like the Bitcoin. You know, yeah, I have a background in economics. People get upset with me, but they can't refute what I'm saying about how Bitcoin is a pyramid scheme. I'm happy to explain it to you if you want to at another time. But if you understand what a pyramid scheme, it's where you take investments from people and you organize a structure so that they get their money back, but you use their money to entice many other people to invest who are never going to get their money back. That's how these things work. So festivals like Carnaval are heavily influenced, and this happens in Haiti every year, heavily influenced by African culture, just like Mardi Gras in the US. But again, you know, we didn't have the numbers. So our culture has been misrepresented, stolen in this country. So even a lot of Africans walk around, you know, my family's from Louisiana. And even a lot of Africans here from Louisiana walk around talking about Louisiana's French Creole. If you have relatives like I do from Louisiana, my parents, grandparents, everybody's from there on both sides of my family. I know you've heard that Louisiana's French Creole, and never say anything about the African influence, even though it's all around you. It's just you have to look for it though. Like the second line dances during the Mardi Gras. If you're familiar with Mardi Gras, the second line dances are called what? They're called the Zulu dances. Ain't no goddamn French and Creole and Zulu. That's African. That's a people in Africa, a culture. I'll be with them next week. So you got to understand, like, you know, why things are the way they are. So let's talk about colonialism and capitalism's dominance over Haiti, because it's very important, right? From 1492, leading up until the 1990s, France and then the US traded off in punishing Haiti, punishing them for having the audacity to want to be independent, right? By the 1950s and until 1986, this was done by installing and supporting neo-colonial leaders, right? Like Francois Papadoc Duvalier. A picture of him on the screen. And in 1971, from 1956 until 1971, he ruled Haiti with an iron fist. Anybody that rolls up in opposition to Papadoc Duvalier was disappeared. Hundreds of thousands of people. And just like the Zionist state of Israel is the chief, it benefits from U.S. aid, billions of dollars every year. Papadoc Duvalier benefited the same way from the United Snakes of America. And then in 1971, he was succeeded by his son, Jean-Claude Baby Doc Duvalier, who, upon the death of the senior Duvalier, Baby Doc took over and ruled until 1986 when he was overthrown, right? And then he continued to live in Haiti until he died in 2014. You shouldn't have let him live there. But the picture is Papa Doc and then Baby Doc behind him. And these brutal dictators, they had one role: make sure that everything in Haiti was facilitated in a way that benefited capitalism and imperialism. And we'll talk about how they did that in a second. So both Duvaliers ruled with the full support of the U.S. And an example of that is when Baby Doc Duvalier got married in 1980, he had a $2 million wedding that was financed primarily by U.S. officials. This kind of relationship, this is what happens. These people, they do whatever the U.S. wants or whatever the European capitalist countries want, the Zionist state of Israel wants, and they lavish them with gifts, cars, money, jewelry, this type of stuff. Meanwhile, during the 30 plus years that these gangsters ruled Haiti, thousands of people were murdered, like I mentioned, tortured, or disappeared for raising anything resembling a question about how these dictators plundered Haiti's bauxite and lived in complete comfort. This is what happened. So we want to just talk about it in the context of capitalist exploitation of Haiti beyond 2025, 2026, and beyond. The Lavalas Party won a well-organized campaign to win the election in Haiti in 1994-95. And Jean-Bertrand Aristide became Haiti's president. The people were full of hope. It was their first taste of democracy since they were able to wage their revolution, really. But of course, imperialism was not willing to allow, they always talk about, well, we're for democracy. But if you study the world, the last entity on earth that's for democracy is the United States of America. And a lot of these idiots that want to attack me, they say, well, you wouldn't be able to speak if it wasn't for the freedom and democracy of the United States of America. And I tell them, you sound like a goddamn fool. My people, we had our tongues cut out for speaking out. The only reason why I can speak out is because of my people who waged a struggle for justice. So when I speak out, I credit them. I don't credit your goddamn government. I burn US flags. I credit them. They're the ones who made the sacrifice so that I can speak up. They were the ones who paid the price so that I can speak up. So I only owe a debt to them. I don't owe a goddamn thing to Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln made it clear in 1865 that he wanted nothing to do with African people. And he said in his statement on the end of the Civil War, you should read it. I tell these dumbass people contact me. I'm like, you haven't even read that. The Confederate flag. The Confederate flag was not even a thing after 1865. You couldn't find one anywhere. And it didn't resurface until the Civil Rights Movement in the 1950s. That's a fact. Look at that yourself. Nobody had the Confederate flag out the way they do today 100 years ago. It wasn't happening. So that is why we know that it's a racist symbol. But you argue with these barnyard animals who just are just lazy as hell, right? Like and intellectually lazy and spiritually lazy. And so this is what you have to deal with. But what happened here is that the people were full of hope in Haiti. Imperialism drove Aristide from power in 2002. And that's what happened. Like he was released. First, he was removed from power in the 90s by the Clinton administration. Those of us out here talking, well, he was the first black president. You sound like a damn fool saying that. We haven't had no African president. We just had a cracker that you gave credit for being an African president, and we had a graham cracker that you gave credit for being an African president. We haven't had nobody, because the definite African identity has to be defined primarily from a political standpoint. It can't be defined by a biological standpoint. I don't have nothing in common with you because we look the same. I don't know anything about what kind of person you are. I got plenty of Europeans that I would stand with before I stand with many of these people that look like me. I mean, what kind of logic is that? P. Diddy, Nicki Minaj, these are my people. I don't have nothing to do with these people. They are traitors to humanity, as far as I'm concerned. I have nothing to do with them just because we look the same. Nothing whatsoever. And I'm not just saying this because of the troubles that they've encountered over recent times. I never had anything to do with those people. Even when I was in my 20s and 30s and listened to hip hop, I listened to Public Enemy, KRS-One, Poor Righteous Teachers, X-Clan. That was the hip hop I listened to. I never had a Snoop Dogg record. So of course he's a goddamn sellout. I know the truth behind these clowns and buffoons. I have a good friend who I've had for years from Eritrea, and she and her family lived in Long Beach, and her brother, unfortunately, was the person who was unalived in the encounter with Snoop Dogg and his bodyguard in 1993-94. And so I know from our friend that all these people came to Snoop Dogg's trial to testify on his behalf. The people from the church, the white people that knew his parents, who were professional people. These people, not no gangster. He just exploiting the suffering of our people to make money. All of them have done that. Exploiting now, Ice Cube had it right for a few years when he had albums like Death Certificate talking about our struggle, but then he went right back to put your back into it. You can do it, put your back into it. And West Side Connection and all that goddamn foolishness. And you know, he had what did he say in No Vaseline record? I never have dinner with the president. And when I see your ass again, I'll be hesitant. He's talking about Eazy-E, and now he's had dinner with the president. He's had dinner with Trump. So I mean, you're nothing but a damn hypocrite. Like the late Khalid Abdul Muhammad said, Ice Cube melted on me. That's absolutely correct. So, you know, you might say, well, what does all this have to do with Haiti? Everything, everything, because we're fighting a war of liberation. And in order to do that, we have to understand how the contradictions manifest themselves. So eventually, Jean Bertrand Aristide was removed from power in 2002. And this should provide a clue for why imperialism made him gone. What I'm about to say is that Aristide had demanded that France pay Haiti 21 billion US dollars for an indemnity held over Haiti since independence in 1804, right? And so you have to ask the question, and if you've ever had insurance of any kind, you should know what an indemnity is. What an indemnity is its protection against potential damage being waged against you. So what has happened since Haiti has been independent? Since 1804, France, Haiti is one of the poorest countries in the world. It's the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. No question about that. France is one of the richest countries in the world, one of the capitalist countries in the world, a NATO country, all the things that make you a criminal entity. But since how has France gotten there? That's the point. When we say colonialism and slavery finance capitalism, this is a great example. You should get a pen and write it down, because since 1804, France has forced Haiti to pay this indemnity charge. In other words, France has charged Haiti to colonize them. And they raised the price in recent years, as you know, after the Aristide administration went into governance, they raised the price of what they're extorting Haiti. And the reason why they're able to do this is because they can control currency on the world market. France does this to a number of African countries, not just Haiti. They do it through we've had programs talking about how they dominate the Sahel countries in Africa, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, etc., Nigeria, through controlling them, Guinea-Bissau, others, by usage of the CFA Franca currency. And what they do is they promise that they can allow the currencies in these countries like Haiti to maintain some level of stability on the world market in exchange for dominating Haiti's annual revenues. That's what they do. That's a thief. That's what a thief does. It's like protection money by the mafia. That's all it is. One of the richest countries in the world does this to France, to Haiti, rather. So today in 2026, that indemnity against Haiti continues, which means for the last 220 years, Haiti's been forced to pay France back each month, each year, for the colonization, right? And as I mentioned, this happens all over all the colonies that France has. They enact the same type of exploitation and manipulation. Meanwhile, they get the resources from these countries for next to nothing, right? They get, Haiti, if you didn't know, is one of the main places where clothes are sold in the Western Hemisphere. It used to be countries in Asia like Indonesia, and there was world outcry against that, the sweatshops, remember that? And so a lot of that has shut down. Michael Jordan having to answer to the protesters about the Nikes being built in Indonesia being constructed. So they looked for other ways for that to happen. And Haiti, nobody cares about Haiti. That's just a bunch of black people, poor black, savage black people. So nobody cares. So now all of these multinational corporations have moved operations there. And so, again, this is how France is able to exploit the labor of Haiti. They're able to exploit the mineral resources of Niger. As we've mentioned, we'll never tire of saying it. The Eiffel Tower in Paris is lit up by uranium from Niger. 1 out of 3 households in Paris are lit up by uranium from Niger. Meanwhile, the people in Niger are in darkness. They're in darkness. See? And I mentioned earlier at the start of the program, Shakura, in talking to her, she's in Cuba. And that's another myth that hopefully just with this program we've been able to eradicate, because a lot of you believe what the capitalists say about everything. So they say, well, the Cuban dictatorship refuses to give the people internet, refusing to allow them to communicate with people outside of Cuba. And I just had a conversation an hour ago with my daughter from Havana, through WhatsApp, which could not happen if she didn't have internet. I know she has internet because she's talked to me about it. But this is uh, this is a part of the propaganda that they want you to believe when they want to convince you that a place is a dictatorship, because they don't fall under lock and step under their imperialist agenda. So this is what they do to make you think otherwise. And it's very effective. You can't say that it isn't. But clearly, if there's a lack of internet in Cuba, and there is, if there's a lack of internet in Venezuela, and there is, it's not because of um, the government trying to prevent people from using it. It's because the economic blockades against both of those countries that are dominated by the United Snakes of America prevent them from having the technological capacity to supply internet to everybody. It's just really that simple. Even capitalist economists acknowledge that. I know this because I study their reports, so I can know what I'm talking about. This is the value of political education, you all. And that's why, even though y'all know what you're doing and what you're not doing, but what I will give you respect for, those of you that listen to programs like this, is you're here because you want to have an alternative understanding of what's going on in the world. You recognize that what's coming from the capitalist media outlets is garbage, it's trash. And so you deserve respect for that. Now, what you do after you hear it is my question, right? Like, where do you take it? Because the whole point is that we got to keep the information flow going. It's not just for you to listen to it and eat a sandwich and belch and pass gas and fall asleep and wake up tomorrow and forget everything, and then we don't make any further progress, right? So that's what has to happen. But it's important for us to recognize this worldwide relationship, right? Because if we don't recognize it, we won't understand victory on the horizon. And if you are in this country, the United States, today you're besieged by anti-Venezuela, anti-Bolivian revolution propaganda. They talk about Nicolas Maduro as a foregone conclusion that he's a dictator. They just use that word like they say it's Sunday and the sun is in the sky. Nicolas Maduro is a dictator. you know, uh, Canal in Cuba is a dictator. They just do that without any hesitation. And so you just accept it because people don't know any better. But there are some basic things you cannot forget in making that assessment. Number one, the Bolivarian Revolution has been in power for 25 years, since 1999, going on 26 years. That's when the revolution was declared. That's when the first election of Hugo Chavez was completed, and he had a resounding victory. They've had 18 elections since then. 18 elections since 2000. And in each case, the Bolivarians have won decisively. So that's the first thing. And every international source that went there to observe the elections confirmed that the election had no questionable aspects to it, that there was no question that the Bolivarians were successful in winning the elections fair and square. That's the first thing. So if you understand that, you should know what I'm going to say next. If they've been in power 26 years almost, I need you to explain to me how it's a dictatorship if all their people hate them, which is what they keep saying. The United States is doing everything it can to undermine them, and it's the most powerful country in the world. How are they able to stay in power 26 years under those conditions? How is Cuba able to maintain their revolution for 67 years under those same conditions? That doesn't make any sense. If it was not for the revolution, if it's a dictatorship, there's no way that could happen. I told you that my daughter mentioned they had a meeting with the prime minister of Cuba, Sister Arellano, the first woman elected to prime minister. So in this country, that would be the equivalent of that piece of trash, J.D. Vance or Kamala Harris, when she was in that position, who's also a piece of trash. It would be the equivalent of them. And what I'm saying to you is that my daughter said the woman came in the room just by herself. There was no security, none of that. None of that. She just came in the room and she left the room and she left the building. They watched her leave the building. She just walked on the street by herself. She's the second highest politician in the entire country. But you want to tell me Cuba's a dictatorship. And you can go online and look at pictures of Nicolas Maduro out talking to the people with no security. Talk to me. How the hell is that a dictatorship? That's not a dictatorship. You couldn't even, none of these goddamn politicians in this country, you can't get within 100 feet of them without somebody putting you in a death chokehold. Trump, Obama, Clinton, Mickey Mouse, any of these goddamn people, you cannot get close to them without somebody ending your life. But yet you want to tell me, oh, they're a dictatorship and this is a free country. I mean, you sound crazy as hell. Plus, what is a dictator? A dictator is someone who plunders the resources of a country and oppresses the people to do that. That's not what's happening. Revolutions are fought for the people on the bottom of the society. Venezuela has a huge African population. You ain't gonna see none of them interviewed on MSNBC or CIA network. They're gonna talk to that damn Machado woman who was educated at, where was it, Princeton or Yale, one of the Ivy League schools, elite white people, all the white people from Venezuela. That's who you see celebrating. That's who they're talking to. And you don't have enough sense to figure that out? Shit, that's the same shit that happens all the time. So in 2026, Haiti pays France 150 million USD annually for exploiting them. They're still doing that. Haiti's national gross domestic product, national product rather, is only 14 billion. So 7% of the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere's annual revenues have to go to one of the richest countries for nothing but that rich country being an exploitating pirate over the people of Haiti. Meanwhile, the best we can take from that is some of us over here with French names bragging about I'm French. That's a damn disgrace. I'm French. I told you, my people from Louisiana. You know, my father's name was Dehaut. It was a French name. I couldn't wait to change that shit. And I told him, he was still living then. And he agreed. And had he lived long enough, he was like, I might change mine one day. I explained it to him. That's not who we are, Dad. I'm not disrespecting you. I love you. I'm disrespecting these people that made your life so terrible under Jim Crow segregation growing up in Louisiana. That's who I'm thumbing my nose at, and I'm giving homage to our African ancestors who wanted better for us. That's when he understood that. It took a few years, but he understood it. So Haiti, the people of Haiti aren't going anywhere. They will rise. The people of Venezuela will rise. And we want to thank you for joining us. And thank you for being patient with me today. It's just so much happening. You know, I got to talk about it because people are not talking about this stuff. And you got to get out of your hovel. Go talk to somebody about this stuff. And join us next week, January 11th. We're going to be talking about Venezuela specifically. What's really happening in Venezuela over the last 25 years. Real information. So tell some people so they can log in and stop sounding so damn ignorant. And, you know, I said this, ignorance is like an airborne disease. If you don't cut it off at the source, it spreads everywhere. So that's how we got to look at it. The red and white QR code in the top left, you scan that with your smartphone. If your phone is smart, what does that say about you? That's just a question. Scan it with your phone, and you can get all of the APRP programs. If your phone is smart and you're relying on it, what kind of statement does that? What are they telling you about yourself? How they see you? All right. Forward Ever Shop is there. Scan that QR code and buy some clothes that support our revolutionary work. Good thing to do. Hood Communist is on there as well. We have self-defense class. Those of you who are in the Sacramento, California area, come through this Thursday, 6 to 8. Come through. We're going to have a great class, and then I'm going to be in Africa for a couple of weeks. So catch this class, 2775 Cottage Way, like cottage cheese. Unit 15, Sacramento, 2775 Cottage Way, Unit 15, 6 to 8 p.m. You don't need to register. You don't need to sign up. It doesn't cost anything. Youth are welcome. Elders are welcome. People with developmental disabilities are welcome. All of the community is welcome. We're teaching people how to defend themselves against fascism and how to understand what fascism is. That's what we're doing in these classes. So come through. Even if you're not in Sacramento, tell some people. Everybody's welcome. And you should join the APRP, join the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Go to aprp-intl.org. And the QR code in the bottom right, the black and white one, is dealing with some really important work we have as an organization going on in the Sahel region of Africa, Burkina Faso and Niger, and soon Mali and other places where we're bringing in revolutionary literature to organize this Pan-African revolution. So become a monthly sponsor, pay what you can, and do that. And then finally, my book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. It's only $8 for paperback, $5 for the digital version. The QR code is right to the left. Please buy it. If you bought it already, thank you. Go ahead and tell other people to buy it. Call your library and have them order copies. Call your bookstore and have them do that. Help us do this work, you all. And you should want to do it because 100% of the proceeds that I get from this book, I use to buy supplies, resources for the anti-fascist work that I do, which is the reason why I'm getting doxxed as much as I do. And might be my physical demise one day. So at least you can do is support the struggle so we can continue it somehow. All right. We appreciate each and every one of you. Stay strong, forward ever. Thank you, my friend Cassandra. I appreciate that, what you said. Thank you very much. As much as I can do that, that's what I'm here for. Forward ever, backwards never.